natural discussion, but chances are more people will join. So if it seems necessary, we'll like it can expand the circle. There's lots of chairs. So. But it's really great to have Ashley back. How long has it been?
My last visit was in 2012.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. It's been a long time.
Really?
It's been a while.
Yeah. Our honeymoon.
Did you graduate in 2009?
Yes. I did graduate in 2009.
So, anyway, so good to have you back. Awesome that you're blowing the coach. Yeah. And you know what? I'll just pass it over to you because I think everyone here knows more or less what the topic is, but I'll let you introduce it and
Sure.
all that. So,
My name's Ashley Skorobohacz, but I was once known as Ashley Birch. And this is my wife Catherine, sitting beside Carol. Yeah, I came here in 2004 for Katimavik, which is like a youth volunteer program run by Canadian government. And I immediately fell in love with the East Coast, and I loved St. Stephen, and I didn't know any of these people, and I didn't know anybody that went to SSU or anything. I didn't even know SSU existed. But I volunteered at the food bank, and I met a student named Chad, which you guys may remember, and he told me about SSU, and he gave me a tour. And my parents wanted me to go to university, and I wanted to travel, so this was like an excellent combination of both those things. And I wanted to stay on the East Coast as well. And so I found myself here kind of by happenstance, and it really, St. Stephen definitely does feel like a second home, and it does feel like coming back to visit family and almost like your childhood home in a sense, even though I wasn't a child when I was here. And it's really fun walking around the school and seeing what's changed and what's still the same. And when I was at SSU, I was really struggling with mental health and struggled through high school as well. And that, I think, because of SSU's small community and the relationship that you get to have with your professors, I think that is what, I don't think at a traditional university I would have finished in school. I think I probably would have dropped out. But the travel semesters kept me wanting to come back each semester, and the relationships that I had with professors helped me get through when I was struggling to do the schoolwork and stuff. And when I left SSU, I moved back to Ontario, where I'm from, and was still really struggling, and all of a sudden now also didn't have the supportive community that I had helped me get through some of those more difficult times, and ended up being referred to a program called dialectic behavior therapy, and it's a treatment for people with borderline personality disorder. So I was diagnosed in 2010, and borderline personality disorder is an old name that comes from psychiatrists thinking that BPD was kind of like a borderline between psychosis, so disorders like schizophrenia where you're experiencing psychotic episodes, and neurosis, which is things like depression and anxiety and emotional disorders. But that's not actually a very descriptive term of what it actually is. A better descriptive term is emotional dysregulation disorder. And so basically people with borderline personality disorder are hypersensitive to emotional stimulus and then have a very hard time coping with those emotions. So the reason why I take opportunities to talk about borderline personality disorder and my experiences with mental health is because I definitely do want to do what I can to raise awareness and understanding and reduce stigma, and also to say that, you know, people like Kendall and Shelley, the Fitches and the Teasons, and a few other very close friends really were what got me through school. And I want to look at, like, what was it that they were able to do that helped me feel so safe, and how can we do that for each other in society in a more consistent way, because a lot of people don't really know what to do if you feel like your friend is maybe isolating themselves a little bit more, or just seems more moody, or is losing interest in activities, or even comes out and says something to you like they're feeling like hurting themselves or suicidal. And so when I started my therapy program, I really was expecting DBT, which is dialectic behavior therapy. We can have a conversation about that if you're interested in it at another time. But when I started it, I was expecting to be cured of my mental health and my mental illness. And I was expecting that if I did the treatment for the right amount of time and put the effort in, eventually I would no longer have this disorder, and I would no longer struggle with my emotions the way that I did. And because of the way that it's, a good comparison is, so I have a brother who's had a transplant, and because he's had a transplant, he's on medication that suppresses his immune system, which means that if he's around somebody that has a cold, he's very, very likely to get that cold. And for me, it's kind of like I have no emotional immune system. So if something happens that causes sadness or fear or even joy, I'm very prone to kind of like a sponge picking up the emotions of the people around me. And then I have a really hard time processing them through and getting them out of my system and finding healthy ways to do that. And so because of that, when negative emotions would come, I would kind of dwell in them, and I would actually find ways of coping with the difficulty that was making the situation better in the short term, but worse in the long term. So things like self-injury or binge drinking, or you can kind of imagine where else that goes, would ease the pain in the moment because it gave me an escape, but was obviously creating these negative patterns that were making it harder and harder to function. And one of the things that I've been thinking about recently, and the reason why Ray and I started, it was actually Walter and I that started chatting first about faith and mental illness, and then I kind of directed the conversation towards Ray, was how like this faith system that I grew up in affected what I thought, how I thought God should react to my mental illness. And so I grew up in a Pentecostal church, and my brother has a chronic illness, and we believed, the whole church community, including my family, believed that God wanted to heal my brother and used scripture to, and really bought into the idea that if you have the right amount of faith and if you pray long enough, God will heal you. And we expected that healing looked like you no longer have that sickness. And there were some strange instances that happened with my brother that I can't explain scientifically, which baffle my mind and cause confusion for me and can't be described as anything other than miraculous. For example, his colon was removed due to infection, and his colon grew back, which is not something that happens in nature. And he had been in a church service where a guy had said, there's a young man who needs a new colon, and my brother was like, I'm probably the only one here who doesn't have a colon, so it's probably me. And so like stuff like that happened when I was a teenager and really shaped how I thought God interacted in circumstances where there was illness or sickness. And so then when I got to SSU and I started realizing how much I was struggling with depression and mental health, we had moments. I remember with Kendall and Shelley down by the river. I remember another one with Walter and a girl named Andrea at Vineyard, where we were praying, and I really thought I had this breakthrough moment, and God had like miraculously made it so that I was never ever going to feel hopeless again. And now I recognize that expectation as really unrealistic, because what would inevitably happen is depression would seep back into my life, and I would start to feel hopeless, and all of a sudden, not only was I struggling with mental illness, I was also failing in my faith.
Right.
And hopelessness absolutely contradicts the gospel, because the whole point of the gospel is hope. And feeling hopelessness as a part of an illness and being in a Christian environment that says that Jesus is hope and is all the hope that you need made me feel like I was failing as a Christian. And and then even when I started into therapy, I was still expecting that cure, that, you know, this is going to fix the problem so I no longer struggle. So when I got into therapy and if things were going well and then they would get rocky again, that was so difficult, because why was it not this climb from zero to like quote unquote perfection and staying there? Why was I having these big drops again? And then that was really eating away at my self-esteem, and it was eating away at my willingness to participate in my therapy. And so I'd have times where I'd be like, screw this. I was trying to think of an appropriate word. I'm not going to my appointments, I'm not taking the medication, I'm I'm not interested in trying to get better because what the heck is the point? And I think that Shelley Perry posted something one time, long time ago on Facebook. I have no idea what it was in relation to. But she said, it was a quote that she said that faith, the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. And so in all those moments where I felt so certain that I was never, ever, ever going to struggle with suicidal thinking again, or I was never, ever, ever going to feel completely dark and alone, or completely hopeless, or completely sad, and people with borderline personality disorder have a really hard time remembering that they felt different ways. So when I feel happy, it's hard for me to remember that I've ever felt bad. And when I feel bad, it's hard for me to remember that I've ever felt happy. And it's even harder to imagine that I'll have that, a different emotion in the future. It's as if that feeling, and it still happens. Like, I'll be walking down the street after a good day at work, heading home, and I'll be like, I love my job, it's going so well. Like, in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm never gonna have a hard day at work again. And then like the next day, something happens that I'm not prepared for, and it's just like, why am I here? Like, I thought I had arrived. I thought I had gotten to the place that I wanted to be at, and I wasn't ever gonna have that struggle. And some people have shared recently, on Facebook, there's been a video that's been going around about competition and how competition kind of fuels a critical and a judgmental attitude. And I've been thinking about how, even when I was at SSU, I wanted my professors to tell me I was a good writer. I wanted my professors to tell me I was an intelligent. I wanted to get better marks than my peers. Not out of a like, I'm better than you, but just out of like, I'm doing the best I can and look how good I can do. But it inevitably became like, you only look at how good you're doing in comparison to other people. And so when it came to my graduation, I was sitting with the students that were getting their BAs, and across the aisle were all the students that were getting their BAs with honors because they had completed their thesis. And I had started a thesis and dropped it halfway through because it was too much for me to try to complete it while going through all the mental health stuff I was experiencing. And I felt in that moment like this massive failure because I am smart enough and I am a good writer and I should have been. Like, these were all the thoughts in my mind. I should have been enough to be sitting on the side with the BAs with honors students. And even though I had gotten through as much as I had and learned as much as I had and done well enough, like I had done well, in my mind it was not well enough because I wasn't sitting on the side with the BAs with honors. And I wasn't even actually getting my BA at grad. I still had incompleted coursework that I had to finish. And so it just kind of, I remember Kendall came over, I was living at the Rouleau's house. Kendall came over and we had a bonfire, and I like threw in everything that was associated with graduation. The flowers my parents had given me, a card somebody had given me, the little program from the thing, because I just felt like I wasn't my graduation. I didn't do what I came here to do. I came here to do well and to get certain marks. And when I let myself down in those ways, it wasn't because if I could have looked at it as like, you know, I did this class and this is the mark I got and it's because I applied myself to the best of my ability, I think that I would have felt differently. But I was comparing myself to the students around me. And the reality is we all have different capabilities. And even though I may be intelligent, my emotional intelligence was so low at that time that I couldn't consistently apply myself and I couldn't consistently get good marks. And that sense of, I see it at work, and I mean, we have to be confident in ourselves in order to get jobs and in order to get job interviews. And even just in like, confidence is a good thing, but then when we go into situations where you're in an environment, so I work with adults with developmental disabilities, and all the staff are confident in their skills, but sometimes that confidence turns into pride and turns into competing against each other to say, like, you know, if I think that we should do something this way and my coworker thinks we should do it another way, well, I've got more experience, or I've got the best intentions of the clients in mind, or like, I know that this will work, and all the reasons why yours is weak. And instead of just comparing the ideas against each other, we compare ourselves against each other. And I see it at work all the time where people start having this critical attitude against our coworkers, and it really, for people that struggle with mental illness, that kind of competition can really breed othering and isolating, where you feel alone because you don't feel like anyone else around you. Everyone else is other, and you're this one enigma. And I think we live in Hamilton, and being in a city where there are a lot of other people who struggle with mental illness has also really helped me, because I know I'm not the only person. And in a tiny community like this, you can feel like you're the only one going through it, and especially when there's stigma around talking about mental illness, you can feel like you're the only one doubting whether God is enough hope for you, or whether the things that you were taught to believe are true, or whatever it is. And I think that that's part of why I want to talk about faith and mental health, because I want to say that, like, I believe God absolutely was there for me when I needed him to be, and most often it was in the people around me, and it wasn't in this miraculous cure that I was expecting. And so, rather than, I was kind of smiling to myself when we did the circle before lunch, because the reading was about humility, and then also I think Lois mentioned that it's, or Lorna mentioned that it's, what is it, Maundy Thursday. And I think that the attitude that I want to bring into my workplace when I feel this spirit of competitiveness amongst my coworkers is one of humility. And I think that that's where I can see God leading in my faith to take me away from the certainty that I was taught that, you know, God is going to give me this cure, to a spirit of humility that that even, so in let's go back to the context of competition in the workplace or amongst classmates or wherever you find yourself, in humility I can say, like, every single one of my coworkers has something to offer, and I could learn from them. And Jean Vanier writes about the gift of people with disabilities, and the gifts that the whole aspect around L'Arche, the whole design around L'Arche is to uncover the gifts of people who are pushed to the margins of society. And I think that that's also true against the people that we see as our competitors, whether it's coworkers or other students, or, you know, competing for a job against somebody else. There are things that we can learn from those people. And when I walk down the street in Hamilton and I see people who are different from me because of, whether it's because of culture or because of economic background or because of like maybe it's addiction issues or poverty issues, or it could be anything. There is this, like, desire in me, and I think it's part of what society has kind of structured us to do, is to filter into this hierarchy. And I just want to dismantle that as much as I can, and I just want to catch it. I can't do anything about how anyone else views each other, but I can try to catch it in myself, and I can try to say, like, that guy that just got on the bus that I don't want to sit beside me because he reeks of cigarettes, he also has something to teach me. And the coworker that I think is a jerk and I think has a bad attitude towards the clients, he also has something to teach me. And it's not just, it's easy, like, because I work with adults with disabilities, it's easy for me to look at people who are more on the margins and say that they have something to teach me. I find that not that hard to do. It's people who I see kind of in the center, the mainstream, the cool kids, the people who I see as consumeristic. Those are the ones that God is also saying, like, hey, you have to have humility in relation to these people too. Like, you're not better than them because you don't own a brand new fancy car, or because you, like, don't buy Starbucks or shop at Walmart, or, like, whatever it is, you know. Like, I think somehow I've, like, got this better idea of how to live my life well, and people who aren't, people who I see as living more selfishly, I get judgmental with them. And that's, like, it's the same as judging someone because their culture is different, or because they have less money, or because, and I don't think we realize that. I don't think, we almost feel justified sometimes in comparing ourselves to people who we think are, and even, okay, so even my mom, actually maybe almost mostly my mom, we got into an argument about politics recently, and she was like, you know, I had the same attitude you did when I was younger, that my mom's generation was just screwing it all up and my generation was gonna be the one that fixed it all. And I really thought about it, and I was like, I really do see my parents' generation as being like, they only care about work, they only care about money, they don't care about the environment, they don't care about the developing world. And like, and they support Trump, and they like, or Stephen Harper, or whoever, and I get really frustrated, but like even Trump's, like, can you say that? Like even Trump supporters, we have something to learn from. Or even like, we had a conversation recently about,
getting close to the edge there.
yeah, is that pushing you a little bit? It's challenging you a little bit. It's hard, right? But if we're gonna say that everyone has something to teach us and that we can learn from anyone's life experience, because we haven't lived through what they've lived through, it absolutely doesn't mean you have to agree with everything that people say. But I want in my life, in my interactions with people, I want to be comparing ideas, not the person that's standing behind the ideas. And let's see if I missed anything. No, I think I'm good. So I want to ask you guys, like, what does it look like to have faith in the face of mental illness? What does it look like for you guys? And what does it look like to support each other in an environment that does breed competition in some way, and not, and I don't want to say that competition is the problem, because it's not. Catherine and I play hockey. I absolutely love going against the other team and chasing them down, maybe, you know, cornering them off into the, I don't hit people, it's a non-body contact league, but I absolutely will corner them off into the boards if it means I can get the puck from them. And there's an aspect of, and even when we would play hockey here, I loved racing Kendall, and I'm not as fast as Kendall, but I loved trying to catch him. And I love that you sat here next to me, because I can use you for all these examples. And we played board games. Since I met Catherine, I have really embraced my level of nerdiness. Like, Carcassonne, Settlers, I used to watch people playing those games in the in the dining room and be like, those games are for nerds. Like, oh man, I am not losing. Like, if I can do anything to get the most farmers, I will. And it's really made me embrace my nerdiness. And that level of competition actually fuels problem solving, and it fuels comparing ideas against each other. It's when the competition becomes about ranking each other as better or worse. Like, where do I fit in this social hierarchy here? That's what I want to dismantle. That's what I think we need. And I think that's what Jesus was trying to dismantle. And I think that that's why humility and saying, like, because I go into work, do I have all the answers at work? Do I do everything perfectly? Absolutely not. And if I go in critical of someone else's approach with the clients, and then put myself in a position of like, I'm doing it all right, and then I fall down, like, how, not only does that eat away at my own self-esteem, but it eats away at the confidence that other people have in my ability to do my job well. And so I was asking a question and then I started talking again. So I want to ask you guys, like, what does it look like when you're trying to do the best you can in your classes, or you're having discussion about ideas with other people and you're having conflicting points of argument? What does it look like to support each other through that, and to approach that with humility? And what does it look like to have faith in the face of mental illness? And I know that you all have some very interesting thoughts to share.
There's such a connection for me. Kind of the journey I've been on the last little while has been realizing how much of connection there is between how I look at, judge, evaluate, or value myself, and how I do that with other people. And so there's such a connection with, and it's kind of one of those paradoxes that you can't do one first and then the other will come, but it's like something that has to work in tandem, of loving myself, valuing what I can do, so that I'm not being, like, because I'm quite a perfectionist, beating myself up about messing up. Even when you're talking about games, I can sit in a game and just think, I am so stupid because I didn't win this game, like, just beating myself up. And it's angering that I do that. But I think also just noticing those things in yourself. Oh, okay, you can calm down, it's okay. That was just an idea that I had, not me, or whatever. And so valuing, loving myself, but then also listening and valuing other people can help me listen and value myself as well, like just working in tandem. You can't really do one well without doing the other at the same time.
Yeah, we're absolutely, I think, when we have a spirit of criticism or a spirit of judgment, what most often people who are judgmental of others are hardest on themselves. And I think that's, you know, that the idea that competition breeds othering and isolating, I think it is, you know, if I'm pitting myself against other people, or I'm constantly ranking myself against other people, it's, part of it is because I want to put them lower than myself on the list. But it's also the same, and just as problematic is putting other people above and saying, like, well, Kendall never has the struggle that I have with emotional health, so he obviously has everything together, and I obviously don't. And obviously he's able to have more faith in God, and obviously I'm not. And it's not just comparing others to yourself, it's also comparing yourself to others, for sure, that creates that sense of isolation.
That's such an interesting thought, because, like, what if you are sort of emotionally stable, but you're not a Christian, or you're an atheist, or you have different religious beliefs? Then how would you see that person, like, in that attitude of thinking that being emotionally unstable means you don't have any faith? It's like it's all dependent on, like, you being a Christian. Yeah, but I guess in my worldview, I'm like, well, there's so many people who deal with the same ups and downs who aren't religious, you know?
Yeah,
It's like,
and it's not connected to their faith.
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of the mentality that it was pretty popular in the 90s in Pentecostal churches to believe, you know, 100% full healing, and if you had faith, you would have healing, and if you weren't healed, it was because you didn't have faith. And it's just kind of a framework that was built into my mind early on that I had to really work hard to dismantle. I think about when I was coming home so I spent some time in the hospital, and when I was coming home, I was feeling like I was gonna have all this kind of judgment and expectations from the people around me, like I spent time in a psychiatric facility. That's not something that most people, I think absolutely the world is changing and our society is changing, but definitely 20 years ago, if you had a family member that spent time in a psychiatric institution, you would not talk about it. And I came home and my cats were so normal with me being home. Like, they were excited to see me, but they were just like, they didn't care that I had, you know, had been hospitalized because I attempted suicide, or they didn't care that am I home and I'm gonna be stable 100% of the time and, like, never ever struggle again. All they cared about was that I was sitting there on the couch rubbing their bellies. And I was like, if I could have that own attitude for myself, that own presence of just like, it's this moment and where we are, and just be the person that you are, just be the cat owner, you know? You don't have to be the cat owner that's never ever gonna struggle. Because when I struggle with emotions, if I get loud or if I get unpredictable, my cats run. Like, they will hide because they don't like scary loud noises, and if I'm yelling, that's frightening for them, and they've been intimidated by that. But in that moment, that's not the moment they're thinking of. The moment that they're thinking of is, I'm sitting on the couch rubbing their bellies. And if the cats can just be that okay with me coming home from the hospital, then maybe that's the attitude I want to have, and maybe that's the attitude that my family members and friends have. Rachel Barham, I think, yeah, she's over there. I wrote to her last year. I wasn't back at work yet, because I took time off work when I was in the hospital, and I was saying like, Catherine's working and I'm not working, and I feel like everybody expects me to like, now that I'm home, I should be back at work. And she was like, you're home and you're alive, and that's what we want for you. And it was such a statement that made me feel like it's okay to just be at home right now and to eventually work on that. And to not feel like society's expectations have to dictate how quickly I move towards recovery.
I love the, well, I always love when I read your blog. So Ashley has a blog which is called A Deep Breath, right?
Yeah, one deep breath.
One deep breath, yeah. And you write so vulnerably about these things, and you write really. I don't want to reestablish the hierarchy that you're just.
But it's fair to say, like, I'm a brilliant writer.
You are.
It's not. I'm a brilliant writer, and I'm more brilliant than Ray. Like.
It's true.
Ray also has a great blog. He just never ever writes on it.
Also true.
But and the response to your blog has been amazing, because so many people have been amazed at what you can write about, the things that you've faced, and describing therapies, and so and so obviously it's a huge vein of people that have been deeply moved by what you write. Now, in your talk today, I mean, so many things. As you just pour out ideas, because and you did this in class too. But it's just so beautiful to see like this flow of thought, and I'm thinking it's so mature. It's just so rich. You've had to
mature.
Well, you've faced these things which are intensely personal, and you've done it with a good skill set, and you have come to these very mature ways of seeing these things. So there's tremendous self-awareness. I think that's why it's a gift to everybody else when you write. And I loved your thought that real faith is not so much faith in this miraculous bang that happens once in a blue moon, like your brother's example, but it was faith in the love that God comes through people. I love that. And then the other thing I've been listening to in what you're saying is, it seems to me like you're in a dismantling phase, or a dismantling exercise, or at least you're describing that for us. Like, you're dismantling a social hierarchy, and I want to do that too. I love that. And even somehow to honor the people that, like as you say, the Trump supporters, or the people that you just think, where on earth could they be coming from? So okay, so there's
the people who are trying to build the hierarchy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's very difficult to honor those guys. But okay, so there's the dismantling of the social hierarchy. It seems to me that you're saying there's also a dismantling of the bad faith ideas from your early life. Which those things were not healthy, and they weren't good for you. They created bad expectations and a sense of failure. And then it seems to me that you also have been telling us that through love and acceptance and time, through Catherine, I think more than anybody else, that through love and acceptance and through time, you're even learning how to dismantle the intensity of emotion that you feel through the borderline illness. Because that you're learning that, okay, when I'm feeling these things, it's almost impossible for me to believe that I'll feel a different way. But I have to remember that I will. At some point.
There's a guy named Andrew Solomon who he writes about depression, and he also has done some TED Talks. And I was watching one of his things, and he said, like, he's come to accept that he will probably always be in therapy and probably always be on medication. And I was just like, oh, it's okay that I will probably need somebody who will sit with me for 1 hour once a week to talk about what's weighing on me emotionally. That's not my wife, because she's impacted by all the stuff I feel. That is objective and skilled in listening to and kind of helping a person work through emotional difficulties. It's okay that is going to be what helps me to stay stable. That it's not, the purpose of therapy is not to get to an end goal where I no longer need therapy. I will probably be in therapy for the rest of my life. I probably will have to take medication possibly for the rest of my life, possibly for most of the rest of my life. And all of a sudden, like, it actually was, I used to hate taking my pill, and I would struggle with it so much, and Catherine had to start taking a medication for her thyroid, and I don't think anything differently of her because she takes a medication for her thyroid. And so why am I thinking differently of myself for having to take an antidepressant? And Walter, how long did I resist taking antidepressants for? He was trying to get me to go to a doctor because he thought I needed something. And it was like, I was dead set against it. It was multiple years after I left SSU that I finally agreed to start with something. And then still struggled with it so much. And where did this idea come from that taking a pill is somehow making me, it's not even that it's making me weak, it's acknowledging my weakness. And that's what I had the issue with. But I'm more okay with it now than I was. I still struggle sometimes with it, but.
It actually makes you more yourself.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is that I sometimes feel like with Catherine, what if I duped her into marrying me? Like, somehow I tricked her, and now she's stuck with this person who has these overwhelming emotions, and that's who I really am, is the person that struggles. And Catherine really has shown me that the person that I am is like the person who wants to believe that everyone has something to offer, and who wants to build good relationships with the people around me, and invest in my neighborhood, and raise kids, and pet the cats, and play nerdy board games and hockey. Like, that's me. And the struggling emotions is what happens when I'm ill. It's like saying my brother who has cystic fibrosis, it's like saying him coughing is him. Like, no, it's not. It's a symptom of his illness. And it's harder to do with mental illness because it's more linked to identity, I think, than physical illness. But possibly, I haven't struggled with physical illness, so maybe I don't have as much awareness about that. But I probably have. How long have I been talking about this? Should I blow the conch again?
Yeah, there you go.
Lois has a thought.
Yeah, and this may be like really like a stupid idea. Well, it likely is. But
Well, we'll compare the idea and not you.
Okay. So years and years ago, I heard someone say, or I read somewhere, that mental illness may not be so much breakdown as breakthrough. So even like I've loved the way that you described, your journey with all of this. But even now, I wonder, so I'm hearing you say, sorry, your mental illness is something that you're just going to have to kind of deal with all your life. But is there a way that could turn around and you could actually see the mental illness, what we are defining as mental illness, as a breakthrough? That the highs and the lows, as much as they at times may be frustrating, they're actually in some ways, maybe, could we say, are a gift, that you can experience something that lots of us don't experience. And so instead of struggling against that, like, find a way that, it's okay.
I should say, I want to believe that mental illness is something I'm going to have to manage, or like be on the lookout for, manage my vulnerability to, for the rest of my life, rather than deal with as if it's this. And so when we start talking about the potential of parenting, I'm like, but what if I can't be a consistently good parent? What if my negative emotional reactions injure or hurt a child, like, not physically injure, but hurt a child's emotional development? And Catherine's perspective on it, and something that we're talking through with my therapist as well, is that because we both have been so invested in learning about emotions, what causes them, how to recognize them, and how to respond to them, because that's really what I didn't know before. Before I did DBT, I didn't know why I was feeling the way I did. I didn't know how to process how I was feeling about anything. I couldn't even tell you, like, this feels like anxiety. I didn't know that this intention, that's anxiety for me. And now I'm like, oh, my back's tight. Am I feeling nervous? Oh, I'm feeling nervous. What can I do? Is it reasonable that I feel nervous in this situation? Am I in a situation that's presenting me danger in some way? And if I am in a situation that's presenting me danger, how can I get myself into a safe place? And if I'm not in a position that's presenting me danger, for example, do you guys like my scarf? Like, oh, maybe they think my scarf looks pretty, maybe I don't think my scarf. Like, no, I'm not actually in danger of whether you like my scarf or you don't like my scarf. That's not gonna affect me. And so if it's not a reasonable or a valid emotion in the circumstance that I'm in, then how can I act opposite to it instead of feeding it? But all that to say that it's possible that we're actually more equipped to teach kids how to recognize and cope with emotions because of the difficulties we've had or the difficulties that I've had. And it's possible that that we have an ability to create deeper connections with people because of the ups and people with borderline personality disorder I'm thinking of. Because we have those ups and downs, empathy is not something I find hard to do. I'm very good at empathizing. And when I'm in a work situation where a client is acting in a way that is labeled as attention seeking, it's a lot easier for me than some of my coworkers to say, like, if somebody's attention seeking, it's because they're not getting a need met. If somebody's acting aggressively, it's because there's a need that they have that is not being met. And so we gotta get to the root of that to change the behavior, not just punish the person because or like set limits or take away tangibles or put in consequences. Like, it's not, or just give warnings, like, oh, if you do that 3 times, you're gonna get kicked out of our program. Like, well, consequences are important, but there's also a level of like, what's happening to that person. Nobody wants to die. People who struggle with suicide struggle because they don't have a way of coping with the emotion that they're experiencing. And that's where, as a society, we need to build resources and build education and awareness for each other. And not only just the professional resources to be able to say, like, here's a doctor that you can talk to that really knows how to help, or a medication that could help, or whatever, but also the social resources, because those are equally important.
I definitely do think that when we first started dating, I felt like I had the emotional capacity of a log, nothing. I never really felt like I was an overly emotional person. Relationships didn't really affect me too greatly. My parents never really taught me or even, introduced the idea of emotional intelligence, emotional capacity, what different emotions are and how they affect you. I never really learned any of that. And when we started dating, there was a distinct memory I have that Ashley was saying, I'm feeling really frustrated today, and I think it's because this interaction I had earlier in the day, this person said something and it's really lingered, and that's why I'm feeling frustrated right now, 7 hours later. And I thought to myself, wow, that is really, she's really able to analyze and pick up on how a specific interaction affected her. And I've never really thought of it, and it has always affected me, and I've always been able to now recognize how specific emotions affect me, and I'm able to more deeply experience those emotions. And it's really an amazing thing, and I see how there have been times when Ashley has apologized and said, I'm really sorry that this amazing concert we went to has now turned into this almost negative experience because I'm so overjoyed that it's overwhelming.
I do get overwhelmed by people with borderline personality disorder. Positive emotions can feel, even coming back to St. Stephen, I need to be aware of how I'm responding to being back in the red room and seeing all these familiar faces, because the positive can quickly become like, and we're going back to Hamilton on Tuesday, and I'm not going to get to see Kendall and Shelley and their kids and the Teasons and the Fitches, and the positive carries this weight with it, and we've learned.
It has opened my eyes to actually be able to more deeply experience emotions, and it's an amazing thing because I never felt like I was a very emotional person. until meeting Ashley, and I was able to really open my eyes to what emotions really are and how to like comfortably and safely experience them.
We absolutely believe that dialectic behavior therapy, which is basically emotional awareness training, should be taught in high schools. Absolutely, I think that. Not just for people with borderline personality disorder, but everyone benefits. Catherine did a family group, which is for people who are in DBT, for family members that live with them. They can also learn the same skills so that they can help support in those situations, and in those situations that can come up. And she was like this. Everyone needs this. Everyone needs to do the family group, because all of us have instances where we feel completely overwhelmed. And all of us have instances where people we absolutely care about feel completely overwhelmed. And what do we need to get through those situations without making things worse?
And how can we react in a validating way, whether it's to our partner or a friend or a colleague who's experiencing the intense emotions?
So what's the gift you're talking about, Louis? It sounds like the gift you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm just going to try quickly, just because we're past 1:30, just to give people permission if they need to go. But I'm happy we can keep discussing, we'll keep going. So I just wanted to give permission.
Quick question for you. I just did a presentation on DBT.
Oh, no way! That's amazing!
Yeah, it was pretty good. And so I'm tracking with a lot of what you're saying, with like emotional regulation and different techniques to like subvert like your emotion, like distraction techniques and stuff like that. So I was just curious, like when I was reading it, like I don't feel like I would need that therapy or anything, but I was definitely noticing like how helpful it would be. Like ever since I started studying that, I've noticed like, oh, I'm feeling anxiety about going to the school, maybe I shouldn't do that. You know, like maybe I should like subvert that or whatever. So I was just curious what different techniques you use in your counseling process.
I was going to bring my thermometer, and then I didn't bring it. I should have brought my thermometer. I have a thermometer that is, it looks like a drawing of a thermometer. And the bottom level is calm, and I have on one side I have signs of that I'm feeling calm, and then on the other side I have skills that I can use when I'm feeling calm. So calmness for me is like I feel at peace, I feel happy, I feel content, I feel like I'm present in this moment. And then the next level would be like neutral, and then it goes warm, intense, out of control. And I have all my skills listed because it's an easy to access resource. I can look right at it and see where I am. And you talked about distraction, and distraction's especially useful when you're experiencing emotion that you can't do anything to change in this moment. So for example, you have a test, you're sitting in the desk, you've studied, you're ready for it, but there's 5 minutes till the professor hands out the test, and you gotta sit there and cope with your anxiety about the test until it's in front of you. You can't do anything. You can't make time go faster, you can't start the test earlier, you've gotta cope with the emotion. Distraction is great in those moments. So like, I try to list as many states as I can, or as many countries as I can, or if we were like at the airport waiting for a boarding call, and waiting is something that I have a hard time with, and so that's when we would use distraction most often. Or like you're waiting for news from a doctor for a family member who's sick, or specifically when there's an emotion or a situation that you have no control over and you just have to wait through it. Distraction is really good. Or also the intensity, if I'm feeling really intensely hopeless, if I can distract myself with something that's really easy, like watching an episode of Friends, that it'll just take my mind somewhere other than where I am presently until the intensity of the emotion drops, and then I'm better able at problem solving. Because when you try to problem solve when your emotions are really high, all you see is the extremes. All you see is either it ends or it lasts forever. And if you can give yourself something to do, whether it's some people will go for a walk, make yourself a cup of tea, do something funny, like watch a funny YouTube video. Oh man, like watch animal YouTube videos. Buttermilk plays with his friends. Baby goat that jumps off the other baby goats and like ninja kicks them. I highly recommend it. Yeah, stuff like that. And so some of the other skills I use are, if I feel like there's just been, so for example, like I hear a lot of different world news and it can make me feel like, are we all just screwed? Like, what are we living for if we're just killing? It doesn't matter how hard we try to love each other, we just end up killing each other. There's no hope. Then in those situations, the easiest way for me to connect to hope is in an immediate connection with a person. So not big picture stuff, but like, there was a pregnant lady on the bus 2 days ago and her shoe was untied and she had a toddler in her arms and I offered to tie her shoe because I could reach her shoe and she couldn't. And like, now she's not gonna trip, pregnant with a toddler in her arms, walking down the sidewalk. That might not change the crisis in Syria, but it's an action of connection that I can do in this very moment that helps me believe that we're trying, and look for it in other people too, not just in yourself. Like, yeah, that it's the, and even Margaret Ann's postmodernism class, we talked about how the absence, the ache when you feel the absence of justice or love or whatever it is, the absence in itself is light. So for me, like when I feel darkness and that makes me feel despair, that sense of despair in itself is a sign of light. It's a spark. Because it's because I want light that I'm upset that there's no light in this situation. And so hearing about the refugee crisis is probably an example that most people can relate to. Like hearing about it and feeling absolutely hopeless. What on earth am I going to do to change a situation that's happening halfway around the world to millions of people? Like not just one or two people, like millions of people. What can I do to do anything about that? If I feel like I can't do anything, the base minimum, like maybe this is a bit of an undeveloped thought, so I'm kind of rambling around it, but the base level is that I'm upset that this is happening, and that in itself is a sign of hope. And that in itself is a sign that like we are built to care about each other. And so you take that and then you work with it. And if you can get involved in something like the refugee, there's a refugee sponsorship group happening at Vineyard, or like there's things happening in Hamilton, or and then you can try to find the actions, but you have to start with finding the hope, because otherwise the actions are meaningless, right? If there's no hope, why bother trying?
You know, actually, one of the first things you talked about was prayer, and how that sort of certainty kind of prayer didn't turn out to be very life-giving.
Right.
And that's one way that I'm hearing what you're saying now is the desire for justice or for light or something is really intercession. It's the beginning of an intercession that's probably a lot healthier
and lament
than certainty.
Yeah, and lamenting and saying like, I used to say like, well, God will make everything the way it's supposed to be, and now I'm like, but like what? God, you're not doing, like it's not the way it's supposed to be. And it's okay, like Walter taught me, and Lorna too, taught me a lot about lament. And it was not something I understood before I came here. And having places for lament and having forms of prayer that aren't just like, dear Jesus, blah, blah, blah. I was gonna say another example, but now I can't remember. Anyways, yeah, finding ways to express those emotions to God that aren't just like, I want to believe that God has it all in control, but when things feel like they're falling around me, it's really hard for me to be like, I trust you. It's like, it's easier for me to be like, I'm having a hard time trusting you. I'm having a hard time even believing that you're listening. It's a lot easier and more valid to my emotions to say that than to just put on this fake, I trust you because I've been told I have to.
And somehow, for me, in those moments of like, God, I don't even know if you're real, And then I'm like, wait, I'm praying to him, so it's okay.
Yeah, and that's the same as like the light. Luke Wilson, who's another former graduate, and I had this conversation about like, and maybe this is even based on some philosopher, I don't know, you guys could probably tell me because you're closer to your philosophy classes than I am, but like the idea that we desire to believe in God is in itself proof of God's existence, potentially. The desire that you're like, God, I don't know if you're real, is like, well, yeah. It's in itself a step of faith to say that. I've found lighting candles is another good way of praying. So I don't actually have to cognitively think about words. I can just feel an emotion, and I light the candle as an act of prayer, and I sit with the candle. And I don't feel like I have to say or explain to God how I'm feeling. I can just, and I do remember what I was going to say. Naomi, who's another student who used to go here, once told me that it was actually when I came out to her, she was like, in all things, Emmanuel. And it struck me as like, we know that like Emmanuel means God with us, and in all things, Emmanuel is probably a term that a lot of people who grew up in the church have heard. But it all of a sudden struck me like, in all things, in the painful things, in the moments where you don't believe God's with you, in the moments where like your brother who you used to pray for healing for is now all of a sudden like waiting on a transplant list and seems like he's gonna die, and he's got a 12-year-old kid who like, how's she gonna understand everything that's happening with him? In those moments, in all things, Emmanuel. That's easier for me to pray than, God, I believe you're gonna change this situation. Even if you're not gonna change the situation, I want to believe that you're with us in it, even if I don't understand how.
A comment back to your question of faith and mental health. And one of the reflections for me, I think, walking with you, when we didn't, and you still didn't know what was going on, is that I think I feel personally frustrated that our concept of faith can be associated with a blindingness, right? Kind of like you talked about how, because you're with God, you're supposed to be healthy, or if you have faith, then you will be healed. What these things can do is to make us kind of, I think especially from the Western Christian perspective that we've grown up in, is to say, I don't need to bother learning about psychology. I don't need to bother
seeking medical treatment,
learning about some of these things, because God's going to fix it. So there's no point, in going there. And I feel like my own raising was in some ways kind of like influenced by that thinking, because I was like, why was I talking with you, and I'm over 30 years old, and I've even worked with troubled youth in group homes and stuff like that. It's like, how come I don't have some of the tools to help a friend, because that was part of the thing, is that we didn't, like, the people here, we loved you, we tried our best, but we didn't know what was happening, and we were just loving you the best we could, but we didn't have the tools. Why didn't I have the tools? And part of it is actually related to the lens of faith and the way of pursuing faith, right? And so for me, that's just a reflection for me on faith and mental health, and it's like, I don't think I have that right, and integrating them, and looking at things like poverty is a reality of the human condition so far. Mental health is a reality of the human condition. So what are these things that are the realities of the human condition, and it's the Christian mandate to engage with these, right? As much as the orphan and the widow, also anyone who is the minority or the outcast or the alien, right? So there's I think when I think about reflections on mental health and faith, it's like I want something different going forward. Faith to look a different way from what I feel like I'm hearing.
there is absolutely an important role that like praying together with you and Shelley had for me when I was struggling the most. But even bigger than that, like the night that I slept over with Shelley and stayed in her bed because I wasn't safe to be on my own. That is the practical, like, and the hardest part about that is it can be really draining for a friend or a family member of somebody who's struggling with mental illness. It can be really hard to walk with someone through that. But the practicality of like, I'm gonna make you a cup of tea and we'll just sit. Or like Andrea and I, she was part of Student Life at one point. If you guys don't know who she is, like we would just put a movie on and she would fall asleep on the couch and I would watch the movie, but I wasn't by myself. Those kinds of practical skills like absolutely got me through some of the really hard times. And knowing that people believed I had value and people believed I had worth even when I couldn't see it. And I think that those are the things that you and Shelley and others did really well. And as a society, we lack mental health resources, just like you're saying. And we don't necessarily, like you guys do basic first aid. Most of you probably, if you've had some kind of job, have had some kind of first aid training. So if I was like seriously bleeding here, would somebody call 911 and maybe put pressure on it? Like probably, but we don't do mental health first aid as a general thing that we teach the public. And I think it is becoming more significant. Yeah, and I think it is something that we're talking about more, which is absolutely encouraging and exciting.
It does seem like the more destigmatized, like mental health is, the more people can like see elements in their own life, so it's easier to empathize with the fact that everyone has elements of it. For sure. Like when you said that DBT should be taught in high schools, I really vibe with that. Because it does seem like just emotional regulation skills. Like identifying your state. Like just that basic skill of identifying how you're feeling and how to respond to that. Like if more people were capable of that and seeing that in each other, that would be quite the skill.
And even like I did a course that was for family members with loved ones with borderline personality disorder, and it was basically a version of DBT for family members. And it felt like it was almost our own like customized version of like couples counseling and like pre-marriage courses.
Yeah.
And
like how to get through conflict in a relationship, which is not something either of us were good at in previous relationships.
Yeah, and it taught us emotional first aid basically, and like the other skills that Ashley uses are like the dive reflex, where if it's really, really intense, putting her face in a bowl of ice water.
Yeah, there's something called tipping your body chemistry, and so if you are so overwhelmed that you don't trust yourself to be safe, try to get cold. Go outside if it's winter without a jacket, run your hands under ice cold water.
Or squeeze an ice cube really hard.
Put your face in a bucket of cold water, a bowl full of ice water, because what that does is slows your blood pressure down, or lowers your blood pressure, slows your heart rate down. And that actually decreases the intensity of the emotion. It tricks your body, it's called tipping your body chemistry. It tricks your body into thinking that you're calmer than you really feel. Another thing you can do if you're really angry, you feel like maybe you're gonna hit someone, or you feel like you're gonna destroy something, or you have all this anger inside you and you can't do anything with it, run up and down stairs, or do a wall squat or a plank or something like that, do as many push-ups as you can, whatever you can to physically exhaust your body. And anxiousness this works with too. If you feel like you've got this frantic, like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, I'm crawling out of my skin, I'm so anxious right now, making your body feel physically exhausted tricks you into starting to have those calming effects that come after exercise. So after exercise, your body starts replenishing oxygen to your muscles and pumping the blood around and all those, I'm not a, we're liberal arts students here. We don't have to get into the specifics. Yeah, we don't have to get into the specifics of what happens. Yeah, exactly. But it does trick your body into starting to calm down. So if I run up and down the stairs and then lay on my bed, because sometimes going to bed I'm really restless, especially if there's things that I'm worried about. Getting physically exhausted and then going to bed is a lot better than just laying there restless and trying to like convince myself to lay still. Convincing myself to lay still doesn't work very often.
Or like when there have been times where you feel like really aggressive and have this energy or like destructive impulse, doing something in a safe way, like throwing eggs into the bathtub.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a mess that can be cleaned up very easily. You're not actually damaging anything other than these eggs. Or
Not
like
damaging anything
ripping something really cold, like an orange from the fridge. Like ripping it up and smelling the citrus and feeling the cold and the wet, like doing things like that really stimulate a lot of senses all at once is a good skill.
Yeah, just like finding safe ways to be, if you feel like you need to be sad and you can watch Homeward Bound or something like that and make yourself feel sad in a safe way, there's safe ways to be angry and destructive, like ripping up an orange or smashing eggs or throwing like snowballs against the side of a house or smashing a pillow into a bed. Like there are things that you can do that cause destruction. I've damaged walls, I've trashed our apartment, I've even at times like been aggressive with Catherine because I'm like, do something, like I can't cope right now, help. And I'm so like overwhelmed in my emotion that it comes across as intimidation or even aggression. And sometimes it's even like, sometimes people who feel bad want to make other people feel bad because then they know what it feels like and then they might be able to help. And it's not because I don't love Catherine that I want to make her feel bad. It's because I'm feeling so much pain, I need somebody else to understand the pain that I'm in. And in those situations, if we can find safe ways to be aggressive, like smashing my pillow against the bed or squeezing her finger as hard as I can, because like it doesn't hurt if somebody squeezes your finger as hard as they can, but I get the intensity and the muscle contraction, and then I feel the muscles relax when I let go. Those are some of the skills we use. And DBT has a whole ton more, and you can find information online, absolutely, for each specific emotion: fear, anger, sadness, joy, shame.
Yeah, that's part of the process, right? Accepting your emotional state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would feel aggressive and I would feel shame for feeling aggressive because this is a person I love. And I wouldn't do anything about the fact that I feel aggressive. I would just try to fight it down. It's the same as feeling restless in bed and not doing anything except for try to convince myself not to be restless. It doesn't work. You have to accept the thing that you're feeling, even if you don't like what you're feeling. I don't want to be aggressive, but if I feel aggressive, it's better for me to accept that and do something safe to be aggressive than to let it boil until I lose control of my actions or I do something that I'm going to regret afterwards. And that's the biggest problem for most people with BPD is they do short-term things that solve the problem but have long-term consequences. Like ripping up things that are important to me or even just recently, like at Christmas, I was having a bit of a hard time and I ripped up a childhood piano book that I've had of Christmas carols. And it was just like, I mean like, my mom tried to smash a Christmas ornament when I was a kid because she felt like Christmas had been ruined. And it's like, this is, and that is not to say that I blame my mom for this. Like, DBT has actually helped me learn that my parents have emotional deficits and were doing the absolute best they could with the emotional difficulties that they had, and has better enabled me to empathize with my parents for the things that I saw in my childhood as them lacking emotional skills. I don't blame them for lacking emotional skills because who taught them? They didn't have DBT, like, or the social supports that I've had.
Thinking maybe we'll wrap it up, but you're around for a little bit today.
Yes, yes. Yeah, we can hang out for a bit, and we'll be around on
to contact
Yeah.
you, I'm guessing you'd be up for it. Or,
Yes.
Or you can find Ashley's blog. You can talk to just about any one of us on staff, and we would have contact info for Ashley too. So,
Yeah.
but thanks so much for. I mean, obviously for being here. We love that you're here, but thanks for talking about your own very personal struggle. Thanks for challenging us the way that we think, the way we engage with mental health. I mean, it's definitely something I've been learning the last couple of years of how the way our society and even our faith circles need to better understand ourselves and understanding mental health. Yeah. Thanks for engaging.